January 14th, Stormwater Management Advisory Committee. I'd like to call to order the meeting and start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Review and approve meeting minutes from our December 10th meeting. Does anyone have any comments? No comments. I looked through it. I did not have any comments. Okay. Approve meeting minutes. All in favor? All right. Election of chair and vice chair. I just wanted to make just a quick statement before we get started that it's been quite an honor to serve, and it's been fun, it's been challenging, and it's nice that we've made such a great, I think, impact in the community. I'm happy to continue to serve, but there are two members who have come forth and who would like to take over the chair and vice chair position. And I welcome the change and I welcome the input, and just know that I'm there as support for them, and I think they'll do a great job. They've been real assets to our community and to our committee. So I put forth a motion tonight for Paige as vice chair. I'm sorry, Paige as chair and Paul as vice chair. Sorry about that. Unless there's anyone else that I'm not aware of who wanted those roles, I put forth the chair and vice chair positions.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Congratulations. I think you guys will do a great job. Okay, we'll start with first action item, the SFR retroactive application.
Ms. Gill, I'm sorry, you just redid the board, so the chairman has to sit there and the vice chair can sit
Oh,
over.
excellent.
And the chairman now runs the meeting, sorry.
Thank you.
That's right, there you go.
How's that? We'll swap our names. All right, Katie, it's all you. No pressure.
Okay, so the action items, first one, SFR retroactive application. I think there was some concern that there was an application or two that came in that was predated the SFR rebate by about a month, and that there was interest in making it retroactive to the beginning of 2015, January 1st, 2015. Any discussion of that?
Yeah, just to point out, first of all, Heather, is the proposal's not in the packet?
The proposal for
We're going to give to the board.
the memo that you
Yeah.
typed? No, it is not.
Okay.
It probably should have been,
Yeah,
so we could
okay.
vote on it.
Well,
We can
yeah,
still vote on it.
Right.
Right.
So, I mean, we had, amongst the subcommittee here, Heather, Joe, and I, we had some discussion about, we all think it should be retroactive. It's just a matter of how far back. We felt most comfortable just saying, okay, January 2015 would be the point. And you're not going to, after this year, we're not going to see that again. We're just trying to get a
Right.
few people in that wouldn't get approved otherwise.
And it's from our discussion last month, we brought that up, and I think, in anticipation of going before the board, Paul was nice enough to generate a memo indicating such. And I think we voted on it last month officially, or no?
No, we didn't.
We didn't? We just discussed it?
So
Okay.
we should. So I'd like to make
Okay.
a vote that we do make the SFR rebate program retroactive to January 1st. We recommend that to the Board of Commissioners.
I second that. Aye. So, Paul, will you send that memo to Steve tomorrow? I think if you get it tomorrow, then it should be on the next January Board of Commissioners.
And the next item is proposal CH2M for the township-wide assessment. Dan?
Thanks, Paige. I have a few slides to go over. The majority is going to be going through a draft outline of the proposed scope of work for that township-wide study. Before we get to that, hopefully we can all see this. This is a map showing the 4 watersheds that cross over through Radnor Township. The largest of those, of course, is the Darby Creek. That's to the west. Ithan Creek, we all know and love, running through essentially the heart of the township. Gulf Creek is up in the northeast, of course, and in the southeast we have Meadowbrook Run. I thought this was of value to show to get the sense that these watersheds, especially Darby, really do extend beyond the township limits, of course. Watersheds don't really follow municipal boundaries. So the Darby Creek, there's quite a bit of watershed outside of that. And the Gulf Creek as well extends beyond the township limits. And this is going to come up again when we talk about some of the data that's going to be needed to flesh out this model. There's some uncertainties, some unknowns, and part of the process is working through and discovering what we have, what we don't have, what we need to get of the information that we don't have, because we don't need to get every pipe and every inlet and every manhole to do a detailed model, but obviously we're going to need some information. And that part of that process will be evolving as we select projects and areas to focus on further. Now, for the Darby Creek, this is especially an issue because a lot of the area, again, outside the township, I know Tredyffrin has some pretty good storm sewer data. Actually, we have a lot of that data. We don't really know yet about Easttown and Newtown. We'd have to do some investigation, but we're proposing to treat those areas more high level, more broadly, if you will. It's the difference between hydrologic modeling versus hydraulic modeling, where in the township we're proposing, at least in certain areas, to do more of the detailed hydraulic and hydrologic modeling. For areas outside the township where we may not have data, instead of doing an exhaustive search of that data, it's probably going to be higher level hydrologic modeling. So
I'm sorry, Dan, 2 points.
Yes, sorry, Joe.
So the first one, you back?
Oh, yes.
So I just want to be very clear that at least I would recommend a township-wide, so there's areas that aren't in a watershed, but they should be included.
When you mean areas not in a watershed?
Well, if I look at the little corner over there at like 3 o'clock near where I live, like that little piece that you were at, like down in the
Okay.
right? And that go up. Keep going, right there. Are they in a watershed?
They are in a watershed. They're not in one of the 4 maiden watersheds.
Yeah, but they need to be, we
Okay.
we should have a township-wide assessment, not an assessment of 4 of the whatever watersheds are that cover our entire
Understood.
township. Does that make
Sure.
sense?
Yes.
And-
Actually, okay.
And the second question was, every question well, not every, because I'll ask lots of questions, but every question I'll ask, or a lot of them, will be based upon Ithan Creek, because that's my experience. So is Ithan Creek, which was that? Was that hydrologic, both,
You
neither?
mean with the previous model?
That's correct. The previous engineering assessment that you guys completed, because I'd like to know how far astray, if at all, we're going beyond the scope of what was originally done in the
Right.
Ithan.
And the short answer is it was both. It started off as hydrologic, so very high level, surface topography based. That was the flood modeler software that we used, our own proprietary software that looks for high risk flooding locations. When we zoned in into the the Banbury project and the Runnymede project and the South Wayne area, then we took it to a hydraulic level modeling. So it was a hydrologic and hydraulic model at that point. What we're proposing, what you'll see in a minute, is what we'd like to do is start off. We did the entire township before, excluding maybe some of these little pieces that may not have been included, and we can look to include those. But we ran that hydrologic model for the entire township before. We want to start there. We want to analyze the results like we did for Ithan, and then take it to the next level. So the HNH modeling, more enhanced modeling, but not necessarily the entire township, but focused into certain areas.
So analogous to what you did.
Analogous, exactly.
Okay, good. That's
But instead of being as narrowly focused on a particular problem area like the Banbury site, we would be looking at larger areas that ideally cover multiple flooding problems. So it would be a more comprehensive look. So it's not just, here's one solution for this one problem, here's an area with problems, here's several solutions to deal with those problems.
So, Dan, just again, so I understand this. So that sounds like you're digging down deeper earlier. And why would you do that?
It would, I think, answer a lot of the questions that have come up about, once we've honed in on, again, Banbury, using that as an example, I think, and there were a lot of reasons why that was selected, and I don't think we necessarily have to bring that up again, but there were a lot of questions like, well, why Banbury as opposed to these other sites? And I think this analysis, this deeper dive up front, would help to answer some of those questions and give us a more comprehensive look, a more comprehensive assessment of the options and what makes the most sense. And you'll see this as I walk through the steps. Hopefully it'll be a little bit clearer.
Okay.
I also wanted to mention, I forgot to before, this map also shows, again, if you can see them, some of these red areas or pinkish areas. Those, and there's about, 7 or 8 of those represent what I understand to be, from my conversations with Steve, to be really the worst of the worst flooding locations throughout the township. Now, there's plenty of other more localized locations. We know about Mr. Brotman's property, for example. But these are kind of the most significant areas where homes and roads and driveways are impacted in flooding events.
So since you brought that up,
Yes.
so at the 22nd board meeting in December, there was a list that Bob Z read off. And then from that, we asked that a list be generated, and that was actually something that Maya brought up at the last meeting, that we reach out and officially get something from the fire departments that serve Radnor, the ambulance corps, and the police, as well as the administrative service part of Radnor. And then that be added. So do you have that yet?
Not yet. That would be part of the study. That would be essentially task 1. When we look at the results of the overall township-wide model that's already been set up, we would incorporate and kind of cross-check all those locations.
So do we need to do anything to help you get that?
I think we can work with Steve and the township staff to get that information. Certainly would take any other help that you would offer.
No, if you feel you have enough support to get that, but if you need our help.
Okay.
So those pink circles are areas are identified how? I mean, how do we know that those are the spots?
Those are known from the township staff, again, from my conversations with Steve Norsini. So, for example, probably, again, I think what I'm hearing is one of the worst areas is in Gulf Creek, the North Wayne Basin area. That is considered one of the most significant flooding spots, I think, in the township, just the impacts that flooding has. So these are known locations. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question.
Yeah, okay.
How exactly did you get the boundaries of those?
They're approximate. I mean, they're just, again, based on conversations with Steve, but they're really just approximate locations. They're not meant to be they're not meant to represent any kind of analysis that we've done to date on those areas. Hopefully they're roughly, this area is probably a bit conservative, the way that's drawn, the Gulf Creek area.
Yeah, it's got my house on it.
But some of these hopefully are a little bit more fine-tuned. You'll notice a lot of these locations are at the lower reaches, at least from the township's perspective, the lower reaches of the Darby. And that really means that we need to look up into this area, the tributary area for those locations. It also means we're really not going to be able to do a whole lot to eliminate that flooding, at least in so much as a lot of it's caused by areas outside of the township, without working with, say, Newtown or Easttown. Obviously, there's things we can do up in the Little Darby, which is this stretch here, and I think there are opportunities there. But again, for some of these larger flooding areas, I think it's going to require probably some coordination with your neighbors, frankly. Any other questions on that one? So this is cutting off a little, but
You want us to wait till you're done and then we'll have a discussion, or do you want us to question as you go, or what do you prefer?
I think if you have
Because I'm happy to
questions-
wait if it's easier for you to just walk through.
That's fine.
Okay.
I can just go through it. There's a lot of information here. I don't think and this is pared down. We have a more detailed outline in front of Steve that he's reviewing at present. I tried to kind of pare it down for tonight, getting the highlights of each task. So task 1, there's 6 tasks, and again, definitely open to comments and questions about this. Task 1, as I mentioned, we call it identifying flood risk locations throughout the township. This is taking a model that's already developed for the entire township, and it's analyzing the results. It is cross-checking with known locations. We have a lot of those locations already known. More, seem to come up every week. And it's to come up with a list. It's to come up with a ranked list of flooding locations throughout the township, whether that's 10, 20, 30 locations. I'm not quite sure at this point, but we've been looking at the 25-year event. It seems like that's a good metric to look at for flooding. Again, open to comments on that, but that's what we would propose for this task. For task 2, now this is the data gap analysis and data collection task. I mentioned before, obviously it's critical when we're building a model, we need good inputs. The information that's available at the township, it's in different locations, it's in different formats. Some of it's readily available, some of it's not. There's areas that we just don't have any information for. So we need to do some assessment of what's there, what we need, what's there, what do we have to go out to the field and get. So that's the idea behind this task. We would delineate the watersheds upstream of those key locations, those key problem areas that we identified in task 1. So we're honing our search. Maybe there's areas of the township we don't really have to focus on. We would prioritize modeling locations. Again, this is really trying to get to identifying the worst locations, the worst flooding, and honing the information that we use to build a model. Task 3 is the model. That is, as Paul mentioned, that's kind of the deeper dive model. That's taking the surface model, the hydrologic model, and it's combining it with the hydraulic model, but in a smart and effective way, so that it will help us to develop potential solutions for these flooding locations. And so this is existing conditions. So this is just basically a model of what's there based on the information that we can find, that we can collect from the field, and then based on the highest risk flood locations that we've determined in the previous tasks.
Can I just ask, so that 3-step thing there?
Yes.
That differs from what was done with Ithan in any way, some way?
It does. So task 1 is very much the same as we did for Ithan. It was, again, running the model, surface-based model, identifying, I believe we ended up with 8 to 10 high-risk flood locations. I think we all remember what those were. And that's what we're doing here, but on a larger scale. Okay. It will include Ithan, not so much in that task, but overall, this effort, as we'll talk about actually on the next 2 slides from now, We'd like to flesh out ITHN, so take some of those pieces that had been developed in the model, connect the dots, if you will, so flesh out that model so we'd have a more comprehensive look at all 4 watersheds.
Okay.
Any other questions on those 3 tasks? Or?
So you mentioned a moment ago for like the Ithan Creek that you'd be still doing analysis on that. How much is left compared to what was already done for the assessment?
So task 1 would not include ITHN. I mean, that's been looked at, that's been assessed using that tool. For task 3, that's when now ITHN is back in the model.
Yeah, there was an email from Steve. It kind of, it portrayed a different message. And
okay.
it's clear to me, looking at what you have, is that you've already done a little bit of work on the whole township when you were doing the ITHN,
Right.
and you're going to deepen that, but the ITHN, that's not part of this.
We are proposing that it would be part of the task 3 and task 4.
Oh,
So why don't
task
you
3
go on
and
and then we
4.
can figure out what-
But not,
Right.
no, but not task 1, I mean.
Correct.
Right,
correct,
okay.
Correct. And so, again, Banbury was modeled extensively. Runnymede, South Wayne, that was modeled extensively. It would be connecting those 2 models, so adding the piping network between those, including the middle school site, the middle school system, and then some distance downstream from that. How far down ITHN do we take the model? Again, that's a question.
And this is because we know these are all problem areas.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So just before I get to the next 3 tasks, I offer this again. It's getting cut off on the screen. Can you guys see it on your screens? Okay.
Yeah, we can, actually.
This is just meant to be a summary of the types of information that we need to build a more detailed model. And is the information available? How do we get the information? And then kind of a relative cost to get that information. I'm not going to go through it all, but generally we need stormwater pipes and we need inlets or manholes. We need things like the location, the length, the diameter, the shape, the upstream invert, the downstream invert. Again, all basic stuff. The majority of that information is not available at present, again, in any kind of readily available way. It's not in the GIS. It was not in the map info information that existed when we entered into the picture, if you will. We have locations partially in the information we have. That's all in the GIS now. So we have spatially where the pipes are. They're incomplete, so we know we're missing pipes. Steve knows that there are areas that just don't have any information. And then we know that there's pipes that are shown in the wrong location as well. And so again, the potential sources of all this are the record plans in whatever shape, form or size that they exist in the township. Some are on microfiche, some are just, old paper plans that are in storage, different locations. Or we do field surveying. And as far as we're concerned, the location of the pipes is not as critical as, say, the size and the inverts. So we can do we can send a field crew out and not do detailed base plan surveying, but have a crew drop, a tape measure really, just to get inverts, get pipe diameters. Yes, Paul.
So help me connect that to the televised work that I think is being done. I'm not really sure.
Yes. So my understanding of that is that does not provide a record of anything other than the condition. As far as I know, it does not. That's my understanding.
I don't know. I mean, usually we get pipe sizes.
Yeah, we normally
types,
get.
And a report and,
I mean,
and
I have
the
been
video
pushing
itself.
to get some
What exactly
update. I mean, there
did we
is
scope?
supposedly a televised something going on somewhere. I mean, it's in the notes that Steve was going to do it. I'm still waiting to hear about it. So,
Well, I'm used to seeing the pipe size, type, and everything went in as a result of that.
so can we make an action item to get it, just a written update for what is happening with that and then what is being done?
Sure.
Could I ask that maybe be made a little bit more specific? So I think the action is because what my memory, short-term memory is good, my long-term memory sucks. But my short-term memory, Steve had indicated that he was going to go to the Board of Commissioners in February to get that televising contract awarded. So this February.
So we haven't even awarded it.
No, that's what I recall seeing in an email from Steve.
This is, I mean, you
Going on
can
for
look
like
in the
a year.
notes. It's last year, like
Yeah, it was
March.
last year.
That was probably one of our first recommendations. But anyway,
But if I could
we
just
can
finish.
still
Right.
incorporate that, is what you're trying to say. It's
Right,
not a
I
done
think
deal.
I think we need to understand the scope, and short of it being done, we should not duplicate effort and try to understand how they can support your effort. And I guess, unless I'm wrong, this page is more than we did on Ithan. You know, when I was asking originally what's different, this to me, what strikes me is this page is different. Right?
It is.
Right, we didn't do any of that. Not that it's good or bad.
Correct.
This is in addition to.
We did on a smaller scale. For Banbury, you know, there was a little bit of research. Really, it was Steve finding the old plans that happened to be available for that site. So we did have some storm sewer data there. For the Runnymede, South Wayne area, we had site surveys done when we did the Radnor Middle School projects. More recently, there were some site surveys done. So we had information there. Were there gaps? Yes, and we had to make some assumptions. We'll probably have to do that anywhere we go through the township. That's just, or anywhere really. But so we did some of that, but not as comprehensive as what we're planning here. And, you know, again, there's uncertainty here. So we're trying to work with Steve to put some parameters on how, you know, how to define that, the level of effort for that task. Obviously, again, we don't necessarily have to search every record plan throughout the township, you know, catalog every pipe, every inlet. So we want to make sure that we get what we need to get. Any other questions on that?
Just I mean, so this is scope, you know, and scope's money. So, and I don't know how we would write this in, but it's almost like this should be a defined level of effort on like a per day basis to send a field crew to the field that,
Right.
because I assume you're not planning on modeling something where we know there's no flooding because we've done the
Correct.
step one and it says there isn't. So so it's kind of like a honed in approach.
Exactly.
And so if this were just defined at like a per something.
That's exactly what we propose to do. Yeah, exactly. Like an allowance, you know, so many days for a field crew, exactly. In fact, we've talked to Steve about the kind of the record search as being, you know, kind of an ideal job for a college student, for example, an intern, you know, that kind of a thing. So I know Steve is exploring those options as well. So any Villanova students that are watching want to get involved. So just moving on, tasks 4, 5, and 6. So task 4 is, again, this is similar to what we did for Ithan. This is looking at where there are opportunities to do flood mitigation projects in the problem areas. So looking in the drainage areas to these flooding locations, where are there opportunities to do some projects? We don't necessarily, at this point, I think, have to decide to remain solely in the public realm. I think we could, for the sake of the level of effort and the scope, I don't think it makes sense to define that. I think I'd rather keep it open. Again, we can have that conversation another day or now if we want to open it up to private areas as well, knowing that that's going to take some work to approach those owners to make that project happen. So task 4.
So are we saying that's a possibility within the scope, or that's not within the scope whatsoever?
It's certainly a possibility within the scope.
So we're not ruling it in or out, it's a question mark?
Correct.
I think that's probably the best place we can put it right now.
Right. There may be certain areas where you know, it makes overwhelming sense to think about some projects on private properties. Other locations it may not make any sense. But I think, again, you know, modeling something that's on a private or a public property really doesn't make a difference from a modeling perspective.
Just a matter of doing that legwork in advance to, you know, find a willing partner before you invest any time and energy into an analysis.
Right.
Yes, now as good a time as any. I guess back to Ethan, right? So when you finished each of the tasks, monthly, we would see where you were, and then you would outbrief us on your results. So I assume that would be the same process here as the tasks go on. So we'll have ability to peer in, see what's going on, and
Absolutely.
as we did last time.
Yeah, absolutely. And that would be part of the fleshed out scope is, at this milestone, presentation will be made. As you'll see is when we get to task 5, we're proposing a workshop, a prioritization workshop, which I'll get to more in a minute. So there may be other opportunities to engage with the SWMAC, with the Township, with other stakeholders outside of these meetings. If that makes sense, I don't know. But yeah, absolutely, there'll be a lot of stopgaps along the way. We understand this needs to be, like I think the ITHN process was, somewhat organic. It has to evolve. We'd like to nail it down, obviously, in terms of our level of effort and the budget. But we understand there needs to be some flexibility with it. So task 4, again, very similar to what we did for ITHN. It's really looking for those opportunities. What's different about it for this study is that now we're identifying those solutions, but now we've built this more comprehensive model. So now we would enter in those concepts into the model at a somewhat high level, not a very detailed model, but we would be able to at least determine this idea at this location will have this benefit locally and further downstream. So building that more comprehensive model up front, doing a deeper dive, gives us the opportunity to now explore and really take a more comprehensive look at what these solutions will do. That's the idea behind that.
So
Yes.
developed up to 6 concept plans. That's 6 across the township? Is that?
Yes, you're jumping the gun a little bit. That's okay. Well, so hold that thought. So 4. So that's 4. Basically, it's fleshing out the model with the options, and even in that task, we would look at kind of the first level of prioritizing. So, for example, if for a certain problem area, there might be 3 or 4 potential solutions to deal with that flooding. In the modeling effort, we would explore, does it make sense to do project A and project B, project A but not B, B but not A, all of the above, explore all the different combinations and prioritize in that way. Now 5 is a more defined workshop to prioritize the flood reduction, the flood mitigation projects that we would be developing in task 4. The workshop can really happen at any time through the process, at least in terms of understanding the criteria, like ranking the criteria. It probably won't be a major effort. We can probably do it at one of these meetings, for example. But that's really just defining, and I have a slide that'll talk a little bit more about that. But I think we know what all the different criteria are. Flood impacts, economic impacts, environmental impacts. And it's ranking those and coming up with a strategy whereby we can prioritize projects, and that's the second part of that task. So if there's a list of, say, 20 projects, they would end up being put into this tool, and we would see, based on that, what are the priorities for these projects. Actually, I'm just going to jump to that real quick before I go back to 6. So this, I may have presented these images before. This is just an example of a ranking and prioritization process that we've done. Actually, this is a project in Philadelphia. If you can see in the upper left, that's an example of ranking criteria. In this case, we looked at things like tree canopy, O&M needs, the cost per greened acre. Greened acre is the metric that the Philadelphia Water Department uses. A greened acre is 1 acre, 1 inch over 1 acre, basically, that's treated, either infiltrated or held temporarily. The number of greened acres, the public amenity benefit, and you can see how they were, in this case, ranked. So greened acres took up the biggest part of the pie. The cost was the next biggest, tied with operation and maintenance needs. And then that Ranking the criteria then allows us to enter in any number of projects into this tool, and it gives us something like this, where this is an example of a project on the left, which was the highest ranked, highest prioritized project, because it really scored highly on all the different criteria. So it hit on a number of different things, and that's why that particular project, whatever that one was, it happened to be a recreation center in Philly. That one was the highest priority. So that was something that wasn't really defined in the Ithan Creek study. That wasn't something that was really part of that study. And just going back, so the final task, again, similar to what we've done for Ithan, would be the development of concept plans. These are more detailed, well, you know what they are. You've seen them for Banbury. These are more detailed plans, still at conceptual level, that could transition into the design phase via the RFP process. Whether it's 6, whether it's less, whether it's more, again, it's really up to, I think, you all in the township. If you don't want that task included, that's certainly another option. So now we're looking at, as I show at the bottom, right now we're in about $275,000 to $300,000 range for this effort with all that, all those tasks, and that does include some allowances for field data collection and for record searching. Again, there's an uncertainty there. Steve, I know, has been, he's directed us that he wants this effort to be all-inclusive. He wants all the bases covered, and that's what we're trying to do with this. So,
I'd like to offer just an idea, is that, again, Ithan model. I would suggest that we may want to consider doing options or tasks 1 to 4 under a base contract with tasks 5 and 6 proposed as options that we could exercise as a township or not exercise. And the reason I say that is because it would seem to me by the end of 4, working with us along the way, you'll get feedback, and I think we'll end up with a prioritized list that may not have the level of detail, the level of broadness that you got from your 5 and 6, but we also have constituents and other things that need to be dealt with. And does it make sense to do that with these guys as consultants now, or do we wait and see where we are and then decide whether 5 and 6 make sense later, and we award that as just an option or not? Because I guess I really struggle with 6, because where did 6 come from? Maybe it's 10, maybe it's 2, and then if we found out we don't have the money to do 6 anyway, so why not just figure out after we finish 4, we have a break point there, and we say, all right, the dollars indicate we can do 1 over the next 2 years, or 2 over the next 2 years, so let's pick 2 or pick 3 and do. So.
I agree, especially with the Ithan Creek. We talked about, in addition to Banbury, there were other areas that we started looking at and diving into, and we thought, wait, A, we can't afford it right now. Right. B, we have to see what is the worst and most noteworthy, worst flooding, most noteworthy project, and that was Banbury Way, and that was just 2 in Ithan Creek watershed. And the project alone is going to eat up approximately 1 year of the impact fee. So to come up and spend the money with 6, not saying we don't eventually get there, we might, but I kind of agree with you, Joe.
Joe, I agree with you about task 6, but I think task 5 is important. I don't think this group is going to be able to prioritize with all the necessary criteria that's being developed. We're going to have a rough enough time agreeing with the criteria, let alone prioritizing the projects.
I don't know that we would have trouble doing that. I just think it should be more of a concerted effort. It shouldn't be just coming from this group. It should have more stakeholder participation than just our group, I think. For something like that, it's really the township's priorities. It's not, I think getting the Board of Commissioners involved, getting, some other people to the table would be important, because ultimately, the funding has to be approved by the Board of Commissioners.
But, and so I should have been clear, I didn't mean that we shouldn't do that. It's just that, are we ready to go under contract for that task now? Or should we wait and decide, because we may decide that we can do that with Dan's help just in his normal stormwater role, instead of it being called out as a separate task, for example. I mean, there's just, in my mind, there's just too many, I'm struggling past 4. That's, I guess, where I'm.
I see what you're saying. I mean, I'm struggling with the fee because it's such a high percentage of what we have to work with. Not that it's not a realistic cost. It's just that the more we spend on the study or the assessment, the less we have available for design and construction. So if there's anything you can recommend that we can either delay or scale back on to bring the cost down, because you're the one who really knows where the, where the costs are coming from. I don't think Task 5 is going to be a big cost, but some of the field work could be larger costs. I'm not sure.
It seems like we're flying at a really low level as opposed to Ithan Creek. We flew at a higher level, and then we pinpointed a few hot spots, and then we dove really deep to see what made sense for that area, for that watershed. So I was just wondering, I mean, it's nice to know Project A, Project B, how will A affect B and downhill? That's great, but to spend all that money now when we don't even have an idea of what the hot spots are. I kind of liked having enough analysis for Ithan Creek watershed that we did identify the hot spots and we came up with solutions to it. And just wondering if that's the approach to go again, especially since we can't do 6 projects. That let's come up with a list, but tackle one at a time and find out what is really the need in that watershed and start there.
Continuing along the cheap, because that's where I started too, being cheap. But could 2 be folded into 4? In other words, 2, we struggle a little bit with sending a whole bunch of guys with orange hats and yellow cones and flashing stuff. So is it possible that some of the gap analysis, some could be done as part of 2 at the higher level, but then when you got through 3 and you were ready to really start, looking at pinpointing hotspots, like, so for example, with our example, like Banbury, you would have actually, in that case, probably sent somebody there to survey that whole area, because the effect of Banbury that flows down to Wayne, that flows down to the fire, that would, do you know what I mean?
Yes. So I think it wouldn't be so much 4, it would be 3. So 3 is really building the model. What 4 is, it's looking for the solutions that then get plugged into the model once it's already built. 3 and 4 are really the biggest efforts I see as in this study. It's hard to, again, kind of put parameters around task 2 at this moment. I mean, we're going to have to make some assumptions about level of effort, as you mentioned, field crew, it's some number of days out in the field. It's hard to say, how many days at this point, but we can come up with an estimate for sure. But I think this process, we struggled with crafting this, and not to say that this is the perfect version of it, but I think one, again, parallels with the Ithan study, it really highlights where we need to look further. And I think what I'd like to do with 3 is take a deeper dive at a larger area. And again, you might disagree, but I think that's the difference. It's versus honing in on a smaller area. Banbury is the great example of that. Versus something that's a little bit bigger. It's going to take a little bit more time, a little bit more costs to model, but then right off the bat, it's going to give us an opportunity to look at the different options and see how those potential mitigation projects, the benefits of those carry on downstream, if they do carry on downstream, how far down.
We probably should have asked you right off the bat to just give us a very rough ROM. How's that? Not only a ROM, but a rough ROM of task 1, task 2, task 3, how many K for each. give or take. I mean,
I wonder if you
obviously
wanna
within,
just hold a little bit and let Don.
Yeah, in interest of letting Don speak, because I know he has to run.
And we can come
We
back
might
to
be
this, 'cause I
able
have some
to-
questions too about the modeling, so.
Is that okay with everyone? Okay.
Certainly okay with me. So thank you. All right, well, thanks. Just the background of this is that we had a Board of Commissioners meeting. Heather came to the meeting. She offered those of us on the Board of Commissioners that had either suggestions or concerns to come to a meeting, express our concerns or suggestions to your group. There's no agenda, there's no action item, there's no vote. This is my input on the things that you've been talking about tonight and the previous nights. So first, just the mission, as I see it for me, is all I want to do is change the trajectory a bit. On my end as commissioner, I'm seeing some inefficiencies and some ineffectiveness that I want to remedy. I think we should get a little more cost-benefit analysis in the process. I still think that 4 or 5 years into it, we still have, at the public level, we still have some misunderstandings about stormwater and about the potential impact that we can have. And so I don't think we're doing a very good job of controlling expectations. At no point in 5 years we've had this issue before us, and I don't think any point in the future am I ever going to tell somebody, I won't support this unless you have all these elements. There's been compromise in this from the beginning. There's compromise in the future. But for me, there are a lot of items that are sufficiently or insufficient such that I've been voting against a lot of things because in my opinion, there's some very key missing elements. So tonight I'm going to talk a little bit about what we did right, because we have done a lot of correct things in the last 5 years. I'm going to talk about what I think we're doing wrong. I'm going to talk about some of the changes that I suggest, that trajectory, that direction that I want to push it. And then I'll finish with a hypothetical and a conclusion. And then if you have questions for me, I'd be happy to answer. So first, what we did wrong, what we did right. So first, we have provided a forum, which people haven't had before. And I feel, as commissioner, I feel like I'm aware of the qualitative magnitude of the problem, meaning I know where the problem is, who's affected by it, how they're affected by it. That, to me, is very good. I'll use the Banbury project. That had a lot of elements to it that I feel like I've been asking for 4 or 5 years and not been getting. And so it's good to see that we are, there is movement in the direction that, I believe to be a productive direction. So now sort of some of the things that aren't right. So some of these are the things that I think we need to change. We haven't had enough sensitivity analysis, and we haven't had enough cost-benefit analysis in it. So examples, North Wayne Basin, in my opinion, we're analyzing the wrong variable. I'll give the example of, the Board of Commissioners chose peak rate and marginal reduction in peak rate. We had a study from Pannoni that said essentially do the sort of things that CH2M Hill is presenting tonight. We didn't do those sort of things for the North Wayne Basin. We hired CH2M Hill to come up with a solution for Banbury. We didn't tell them what to do, but they chose to use the variable of flood level in the intersection, and then they did a sensitivity analysis on the intervention that they proposed. And then when I was sitting there as commissioner, what I was able to say is for $1 million, I get to make the problem go away completely for everything up to a 25-year storm. They also characterized the events that affected the intersection. So what they communicated to us is that the 25-year storm is the storm that most people are complaining about for that particular intersection. So in that example, that was an example of it working correctly, but we're not doing that with a lot of the other interventions that we've proposed. North Wayne Field, we didn't do it. The pipe connection project for the middle school, if it was done, I didn't get it. I asked for it that night. I asked for what would be the sensitivity, what impact will this have on the underground basin? And that information was not available. There were some reasons as to why, some staffing reasons, but that never got to me as a decision maker. We spent some money on dredging. I have no reason to believe that I think all we did was move around the low flow channel. People aren't coming to us troubled about, about low flow conditions. They're not troubled about the water quality aspects of it. I don't want to discount them, but they're coming to us about, I've got water in my basement, or my air conditioning unit is underwater. And so moving the low flow channel, isn't really a solution for them. We didn't do any kind of sensitivity analysis on that. We just went off and did it. We had an emergency, we had $130,000 or $100,000 plus or minus that we approved on an emergency basis for North Wayne Field. I don't know that we ever did it, but it couldn't have been such an emergency if, 5 or 6 years later, we still haven't done it. We approved money for changing the orientation of the discharge valve into, I forget, in the North Wayne Field area. I don't know that we did that either, did we? But, yeah, did we do that or not?
Well, it's all part of the same project, and if it's going to happen, it's going to happen all at the same time. So
Yeah.
the pipe
So we didn't do
reorientation.
any kind of any sensitivity analysis on that. We just,
Well, that was a project when we initially started this committee that we were directed by the board, that we weren't weighing in on it. It was already through the process.
So-
So just, just so you know, but that
nothing I'm saying tonight is
I know.
intended to find fault with your group.
we just didn't want you
No,
to think
but
we're
just for
ignoring a
you,
project.
just for you to understand our process, the only involvement we've really had in anything you've mentioned so far tonight is Banbury.
Okay, well, then you can take some solace, and that's the one that I pointed out as being effective. But, so I'm not here, I really don't want to point, I want to make it right, not be right. So.
No, we understand
yeah.
your process, but
Yeah.
I think what we're saying is maybe we need to be more involved in some of
Okay.
the other decisions.
So for that one, that was one where, we authorized $100,000 plus or minus, and that was really based upon a YouTube video. That was the fullest amount of the analysis that I saw. Scale and expectation. I still think we have a misunderstanding between what I'll call floodway and stormwater. We're treating the floodway, you can't do an intervention for a floodway the same you would do it for stormwater management. Somebody puts a deck on their house, a basin is the right design. It's the right intervention for putting a deck on your house. If you have 2 linear miles that's underwater during a flooding event, I don't believe a basin is the right intervention for that. But we're sometimes thinking that floodway problems and stormwater problems are the same thing, but they're not. The rain barrel program, I love it, but there's no reason to believe that it's going to have any effect on flooding issues. I've never seen any literature that says that a rain barrel program will positively impact the floodway. I see some benefit to water quality and things of that sort. And I don't think that people know that. I think that lots of people believe that if we put enough rain barrels in, it'll keep water out of my basement and my air conditioner dry. So that's an expectation problem. We still haven't even identified the problem storms. Like, I'll use the Banbury example. We were told this is the problem storm. This is the target, and then we treated for that target. But on the using the North Wayne Basin as an example, we still don't know what storm is the one that's causing at least I don't. If it's been communicated, it hasn't been communicated to me. What storm is the one that's causing water to go over North Wayne Avenue? Which one's the one, people are telling us that the fire trucks are being blocked. And there's no reason, we can't say that the intervention will enhance the capability of a fire truck to get through North Wayne Avenue because we haven't identified the particular storm that is the storm that's problematic. So, that's the scale expectation. The third item is the trends. So the trend in this sort of thing, in my opinion, is toward what I'll call resiliency. So this is just, just chance that this is the APA magazine from August, September of 15. You know, this article is called Designed to Flood. So it's an art, and I circled the word resiliency every time it came up. There's probably 30 times they use the word resiliency. The idea is that that you've got a floodway issue. You want to be able to safely pass the event, not necessarily get the water out of the floodway. The water's going to get to the floodway, and so you want to live. It's like the weather. You want to live within the confines of, wow, this is a harsh, dangerous thing. Let's make it safe. Let's not improve it by taking, a tiny marginal amount of water out of the floodway. So that's what these articles about. This is a park in Chicago that is designed to be inundated and designed to recover quickly after it's inundated. Resilience being the title of this article. There's a lot of articles in here that are about global warming. So there's a flooding element to them, but it's beyond just flooding. I don't know. So you get the idea there that there's, here's an example, a town where they had a similar description to what we had. And one of the things that they did is they mapped the high level areas. So people would not park their cars in those areas rather than try to make it safe for people to park their cars. So that's the one area where I think we're still pushing toward that. Wow, let's get the water out of the floodway. And that's not safe. That's not effective and not safe. And then this came from the, I don't know what Technical Bulletin 1001 means. It's from the National Flood Insurance Program. I stumbled across it and bring it tonight because it kind of proves my point that this is about ensuring that structures built in fill or near special flood hazard areas are reasonably safe from flooding. And the whole thing is about making the unit safe. It's the micro design of the unit. It's not about, if your house is in a floodway, let's try to get less water in the floodway. It's if your house is in a floodway, let's get your air conditioning unit above the high level mark. Let's get your sump pump system set up, things of that sort. So to me, I use it as an example that I think we're not following the trend. The trend in this industry is not to be stronger than the floodway. It's to be the willow, not the mighty oak. It's to bend with it and safely pass the storm rather than try to fight the storm. Fee versus tax. So we collect the money like a fee, and when it's convenient, we spend it like a tax. There's a difference in this industry that the fee should have a reasonable level of directness. And when we collect everybody's money, and then we don't have a comprehensive list of projects, and we spend a sizable amount of money in one particular watershed that affects one area, then we're breaking that link. And it doesn't have to be, it's not like buying ice cream or pizza. It doesn't have to be that direct, but it has, in my opinion, it needs to be much more direct than it currently is, and particularly if we want to get people to buy into it. If we want people to accept it, to make it sustainable, we have to increase that link between the benefit that one would get and the payment of the fee. Next item is budget. So many times, I'm asked to vote on sizable amounts of money. We've probably had a half a dozen six-figure votes since I've been here. And what I want is a sort of parallel list for all of the different, we have three watersheds, 4 watersheds. Let's get a parallel list. And then, because I want to be able to make the decision about one item in the context of another. Banbury might be the most important project we have going. Maybe that's number 1, but I don't know unless I see that in the context of other projects. So we've been asked to make decisions not in the context of other decisions, which makes it difficult for us to make that decision. And then we haven't gone from general to particular like we should. That idea of the comprehensive list, to give you an example, and I recognize that what you saw tonight was essentially that argument for the comprehensive list. That's the task that's before you. So, as I said earlier, I'm applauding the elements of it that are moving in the direction that I think is appropriate. But, I'll give like North Wayne Field as an example. to me, we had an unnecessary study at a very high level, and then we were talking about basin, and there was a whole bunch of in between. You know, we went 1-5, and I want to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You know, so you know, we spent $70,000 on North Wayne Field for the design already, and we don't own the property, and we don't know that the Board of Commissioners has a consensus to build it yet. So, you know, there are examples of not following that general to particular that would make the process easier on everyone. And then my last item would be, I think your group's task would be better if it was gravitated toward the technical spectrum and less toward the sort of the advocacy spectrum. And what I mean by that, let me just give 2 examples of boards and commissions that we have now that, you know, are working well within 2 very different tasks. So one would be the CARFAC group, which is a very technical body. So it's the financial equivalent of what, you know, you were assembled to be as people with technical capabilities. And when we have capital projects, we don't go to them asking them whether these are good projects. And if you want those projects built, there's no reason why you would go to a CARFAC meeting to lobby for those projects. The CARFAC is there to give us the technical guidance about, you know, financing them and to advise us on the money aspects of it. Planning would be the other end of the spectrum. The people who design planning, the planning process, in my opinion, they want advocacy in the process. They want that subjective, qualitative aspect in the land development. So that's a group that should have that advocacy role. For your group, I would be more comfortable if your task was less advocacy and more technical, in part because I have very technical questions that I want the township to resolve. And if I bring those technical questions to you, like a perfect example would be which variable to use to determine the cost effectiveness of the intervention. At Banbury, we used water level in the intersection. At North Wayne Field, we used peak rate. And that's a technical question that's going to be beyond the capabilities of most people to give reasonable input on. And if your group is an advocacy group, you're going to have a heavenly host of people there telling you why you should be using, so I want your group to be able to make decisions within its very, sort of tight technical box to give us the input that we need on the Board of Commissioners to make those kinds of decisions. So that's it. Those are my, I stopped at 7 when I was, so then I came up with six ways that I want to push it. So one is I think we need to divide into either geographic entities or watershed entities, but something that lets us budget in parallel, meaning that we have different regions of the township. We develop, we've got a budget for the Ithan Creek. We've got 5 or 6 projects in the Ithan Creek. We've got a budget for Gulf Creek. We have 5 or 6 projects in Gulf Creek. And then each year we sit down, your group sits down in circa October, you guys vet this out. It comes to us in December. And then in December, we pick, okay, there's $1 million. We pick these 3 projects for 2017. So, but to do that, we have to break into geographic units, probably watersheds, but it doesn't have to be watersheds, in order to come up with those parallel budgets. The second one is I think we need a more direct link between the fee and the intervention. So perhaps that's related to the second one. The third one is the comprehensive and parallel, meaning it's before we spend $1 million, we should know the extent of these problems and the capabilities of the solutions township-wide, because that's the only way we can make the solution linked to the fee. We have to increase sensitivity analysis, and then revise the scope, make it more technical your particular scope, as I've indicated, more technical. And then the last item for me is I want the fee to go fully to projects that are intended to improve the stormwater problem, meaning I'll give an example of a what I believe to be a poor application of the fee. We had a culvert fail in the 2nd Ward, and we repaired it. It was $700,000. It's a lot of money. The reality is, I have absolute certainty that culvert would have been repaired if there was not a stormwater fee. I have no doubt in my mind that we would have, and so by using $700,000, which is 70% of 1 year's allotment, and using that for a road maintenance program, in my opinion, we disabled our capability to do what I believe the fee was intended to do and what it should be doing, which is to look at the sort of the historical mismanagement of stormwater and build projects that make us go backwards or forward, depending upon perspective. What I mean is to solve a problem that somebody created, 35 years ago by the sort of the institutional mismanagement of stormwater. So, for me, the money would be solely used for interventions, and then all of the maintenance and the routine stuff and all of that would come out of the regular budget, just like it always has. So then last, I'll just say, like, I'll use, I'll call this a hypothetical plan. Like if we had, North Wayne Basin is the pinnacle of it because it seems to be where we have the most controversy, and how we would go about getting a solution in North Wayne using what I identified. So first, we'd have to do some kind of sensitivity analysis on the waterway, which I would imagine we would use continuously, because we would have other interventions along that creek. We would budget in parallel. So if we generate $1 million a year plus or minus, roughly in thirds. So each year there's $350,000 a year that goes to each of the individual watersheds. And then if a project in one watershed is so important and so expensive that it takes 3 years of funding to build up, then so be it. I'm not opposed to borrowing money from the general fund. I'm not opposed to borrowing money from other stormwater funds. There's a heavenly host of ways to do it. But we've got to see, okay, $1 million in the Ithan Creek and be able to weigh that against the projects that are in the Gulf Creek or any of the other creeks. And then I think with that one, we got to build a little more consensus on the BOC before we reach out to the school district and go beyond the school district. So my conclusion is that we've taken some steps in the right direction, but in my opinion, we've taken a lot of steps in the wrong direction. It's not too late, because imagine if somebody identified a problem with Social Security or Medicare or some other problem and fixed it 3 years after they implemented it, we would solve a lot of problems. So it's not too late to fix it. But I do believe we're moving in a direction that's problematic and will continue to be problematic unless we make some changes to it.
Don, thanks for your comments. I just want to say the last couple items you spoke about, I understand, and others have expressed to me that they're concerned where the money is going, but unfortunately, I think that the ordinance or resolution that formed this committee requires us to use the funds for maintenance, and that's a difficulty because some of those things come up and they're unexpected, and then suddenly that money is taken away
Right.
from us.
And one of the things that some of us on the Board of Commissioners are pushing for is to rewrite that. I mean, we decided that, so if we think it's a mistake, then we have the authority to change it. So that's one of the things that I would like to change, and I'm trying to make that change at the Board of Commissioner level.
I think we would wholeheartedly support that.
Yeah, you're not going to be able, I understand your time short, but the budget package you have that's in this is accurate, that shows that, we're going to be well over $1 million in the next 2 years.
Yeah, that's not surprising to anybody, right? I mean, you look at these projects, the Banbury project was $1 million,
I meant repair. Malin Road,
yeah.
Mallbridge.
Okay.
I mean, they're right in your packet.
Right.
There's
So
over $1 million.
those of us who work in this know Like, this isn't new to us. It wasn't like we looked at $1 million and said, yeah, that's going to do a lot of maintenance and a lot of projects. So, but to those who don't, they might have thought $1 million will capture a lot of these things. One of the initial, this was one of the, in my opinion, one of the problems that we had 5 years ago when we set this up, is we had this is my observation. I know Jim is my esteemed colleague. He's not going to agree with everything I've just said, so I'm speaking for myself, not for others. But I believe one of the misunderstandings we had is we thought you could manage stormwater the way you manage wastewater. Wastewater is a nice little contained nut. You know, it comes out you produce it when you turn your spigot on, and you turn it into wastewater when you flush your toilet, and then it lends itself nicely to a utility or authority. Stormwater is not like that. It's that gangly thing that spreads out and spreads into every little different thing. There was one's author that said it's like scrambled eggs. Like it's all mixed together. You can't unmix it. So we thought we could generate a fee and then operate this thing. We'll do all our stormwater, within the context of this fee. And now what we're learning is that's not the case. It's spilling over into a lot of things.
Don, so a lot of what you've talked about, as Paige said, feels like above our pay grade, as in it really is a BOC kind of issue to decide. And I think that as far as repairs versus, capital projects, we're proposing a number of 20% of the total fee in any particular year. That would, if you stuck around, you'd hear that in a few minutes. If the board wants to be a different number, they can just make it a different number, and then, we're going to do it on a percentage basis. We're hoping to do it on a percentage basis. So, again, that's what we'll propose to you, and you guys can debate what you want to see. So that's just a comment. I did have a question. I've spoken about this, and I'm still unclear. Based on what you've seen today and what was presented and what Dan has planned for this, which I see as the way to go and what I feel like is the right direction for this board, what of that is advocacy? That's what I'm stuck on.
Sure.
I don't get that.
Sure. Okay. And what I mean by that is if someone wants a project, in my opinion, they shouldn't be coming here to get that project. They don't go to Carfax to get the project. Somebody wanted, you want a trail under 476. You don't go to Carfax and advocate for that. What we did is they went to the Board of Commissioners and they said, the library went to the Board of Commissioners and they said, we really want a library. Here's the value of it. The Board of Commissioners made that determination that the library is of value, and then turned to Carfax to identify the best mechanism to do that. And part of why I believe that your mission would be better to be, and let me even back up. I don't see myself as like, this is, if somebody comes and says a nice thing about a project, we'll shut you all down, that sort of thing. It's more of on the spectrum of things. I believe the township would be better served with your group having a relatively technical role relative to advocacy. And the example would be for, I don't know I don't know if you're ready. It's not so much that I want to protect you from us, or us from you, I want to protect you from us. The political process, when that comes here, if I want to turn to this board for technical answers, they're going to be grayed and muddied if in that same process, it's the people advocating for the projects. So to me, I would and then I also feel that we've done, or the township has done, one of the compliments I made of the township is they've done a good job of communicating where the problems are and a qualitative description of those problems to us. So I don't feel that I need your group telling me that Farm Road is a problem. I felt like I already knew that. What I needed your group to tell me was that if I invest $1 million, I can make the problem go away, because we identified that it was a 25-year storm that's mostly problematic, and then we did a sensitivity analysis. We vetted the sensitivity analysis, so that would be a function of yours, and then now we're bringing it to you and we're saying, if you choose to spend $1 million, then you're gonna, the problem's going to go away. So, I don't know, is that clear? Did I speak too much, Paul? Is that?
No, I understand where you're coming from. Good, thanks.
But
Yeah.
in response to that, we've never felt otherwise. We've never felt this is an advocacy group. We've never approached it as an advocacy group in any way, shape, or form. Our only advocacy is to advocate for safety of the residents. That's our priority, number one, the safety of the Radnor residents. That's been what's driving our decision-making, that we actually had the freedom to decide. There's been a lot that's been pushed on us that really we were not given input. We were given almost like as a mandate. And those are those maintenance and other things. So we would 100% support the types of things that you're discussing as far as using this only, don't even go say stormwater management, say to address stormwater flooding or problems that were already identified throughout the township, because you can do a study and then quantify those existing problems that we already know about. If we don't know about it today, then it can't be a higher priority than the ones we already know about. That's safety. So further down the line, once we've addressed the safety concerns, then we have to start thinking in a different direction. But number one, we need to address the safety concerns of the residents. And that is not a watershed-based decision. That is township-wide. And so the one thing that I'm not really in favor of is having each watershed has different projects. I think everything should be township-wide. And part of the fee that you're paying is not just what's happening down your street. Right. Because this isn't about property flooding. This is about infrastructure and, our roadways and things like that.
Right. So perfectly fine. My reaction to that would be then don't have a fee. Make the whole thing a lot easier and just roll it into the tax.
Then you just lost all your non-taxed entities.
Okay, well, that's an element too. Now, you also remember that we have a lot of costs associated with the fee also. The non-tax entities represent something on the order of $250,000 is my understanding.
But they were actually half of the fee.
Well, we'll find that out, but I don't believe that to be the case. And then we also have, we have a sizable amount of costs of operating it like a fee instead of a tax. We add costs to the vendor, we have software. So my opinion is if you want to spend it like a tax, which is appropriate, I accept that argument, then collect it like a tax. There's nothing, perfectly fine. And then just another way that you could nuance this is we could just say, okay, well, all these projects that are township-wide, like you said, that everyone should pay to, those are the ones that we don't use them for the fee. We use them for the tax. And then we have this parallel structure of the fee, which is only to do those projects that link the payer to the intervention. So
I would like to ask the chair where we are in this meeting. I don't expect to spend 35 minutes talking about a lot of theory and hypotheticals, but I would like to see the board finish its agenda, and at some point I would like to say a few things about what you've accomplished and what I'd like to see you do.
Very well. Then, Dan, were you finished with your presentation?
I'll wrap up. Thank you for that. And please don't, I hope nothing that I said was taken as that I don't believe you've accomplished anything. Like, I don't want that I didn't come here with that in mind. I'm here because I believe we can do it better, and I also believe that we are putting rules on you that are making your job more difficult than it needs to be. So,
yeah, I don't think any of us are taking it personally. I think that we've felt a lot of that frustration ourselves and tried to find ways to mitigate some of those same concerns that you have. I think I would say at least 80% of it would probably have consensus of this committee, 80% of what you expressed.
Very good. Well, thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you for comments. Dan, or you want to wrap up your portion, or?
I had, yeah. So we had this question about whether or not we should do a small project versus a bigger set of projects, your pooled kind of approach. And I guess what I thought about was, is there a reason to look bigger than we have been, say, when we did Ithan? Is there some kind of overlapping impact that would justify an approach, the deeper, bigger approach that you're thinking about? Is that a sensible question? I don't even know if it's a sensible question.
I'm not even sure that that's what the proposal is. Is this proposal really that different than the Ithan Creek proposal? Can you really speak on that? Because how much of this fee is coming from linking Banbury and South Wayne and all that? Is that a sizable part of our expense? Because it could be a sizable amount of work. That's why I ask.
So let me back up and I think address the first question. So I think what the difference is, comparing it to what we did for Ithan, so we're starting at, say, the 50,000 foot level. For Ithan, then we honed in to, say, the 5,000 foot level for Banbury. And there were few potential projects we could have really done in there. I mean, yes, we could have modeled, and we did a little bit of that, small scale things on residential properties. Maybe we could have done more green streets in the watershed. But the idea here is to not zoom in as closely, but it's to say take the whole watershed down to, say, the Radnor Middle School and model that more comprehensively. That would be kind of the difference, I think, in this approach. It's just to not go to the 5,000 foot level, maybe go to the 10,000 foot level, if that makes sense. It gives us, again, more of an opportunity to not do the piecemeal modeling, but doing it more comprehensively, looking at different things. And I think addressing Commissioner Curley's comments about comparing, kind of this parallel list, I think he said, okay, this project is good, maybe, but how does it compare to another project? And this would give us more of a chance to do that.
So once we've identified some locations that we need to work on, then you're going to pick like a point of interest, and then 1 to 10, say, just interventions within that watershed to that point of interest, and then how do they compare against each other, the different combinations, cost benefit? Is that what we're talking about?
That's exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah, well, that's what you're saying in item 5, correct? Your total prioritization of all the projects?
Well,
much the same as you did for Philadelphia?
Yes, it's 4 and 5, really. I mean, 4 is really the engine that's, that's where we're, 5 is now we've got these projects, now let's see what, let's prioritize. And I do agree with, what Joe said earlier, maybe that task can be pulled out into just more of the discussions that we have at these meetings. Maybe it doesn't have to be, in a separate task later on in this process. Yeah.
I think all of us are just trying to get, as taxpayers, we're just trying to get, you did such a great job at Ithan. This is my personal opinion, right? I just really, and I've said that to you a couple times, I just really thought you did a bang-up job there. It's like, why, I understand why I might want to go more, but you gave us enough data that, I'd certainly like to understand Midland Avenue, for example. But we weren't ready to go spend more money on Midland Avenue or on Runnymede or until we got the whole township. So I guess I think that's kind of where Heather was headed. It's like, maybe after we see the 10,000 foot level, we'll be a little bit more bought into the lower level. But I guess I'm struggling with the further we go into it without seeing the high level and understanding what our real issues are. Does that make? Because I'd almost rather say, like, have a pool of dollars is the wrong way, but like some tasking that could be very specifically oriented to, because like the 3 RFPs, whether we liked it or not, was good. And we never really did 3 RFPs, right? But we're still I think it was a great success, right? So, you see what I mean? We're like, I wouldn't want us to artificially constrain ourselves when we don't know the answer. That's all.
Joe, what you're saying here is that you want a prioritization of all the projects, so that township-wide. And that's what item number 5 gives us. It gives us time to look at. So when he finishes task 1 through 4, and he roll into task 5 to take the data that he has accumulated and put it into a form that we can all start to talk about. It's really what it boils down to, at least in my mind.
And these projects are more like interventions they're not, it's not one project for one flood site. It's
Right.
different in that regard. So it's not like a project is going to fix a flood site.
Right.
It may assist in fixing 10 flood sites. It could only do a
Exactly.
fraction of one flood site.
So there's our cost benefit.
Right.
So it will give us an idea through a graph very similar to what he did for Philadelphia. It will give us an idea of which projects are really going to give us the most bang for the buck. And that's what we're looking for. One of the things that Mr. Curley did not mention is that you really can't choose projects by watershed, because a project over here, spending money over here on that particular project may have very little to do with overall stormwater problems in the township. And the same thing goes with the advocacy. If someone comes in here with a project, just as they have done, we look at it, we say, okay, thank you. Then we start to look at whether there's any impact. What are those impacts? Should we really be talking about this or not? And I really think it should start here, because the board is not in a position to hear a problem and then make a determination as to whether they should go that way or not, based on that little project. Stormwater goes throughout the entire township. So doing something somewhere could affect us elsewhere.
And that was the whole point of us doing these watershed analysis. In the beginning, I would have liked to have done the whole township. I couldn't get consensus behind that, but I'm glad that now we're moving in that direction, because really I feel like it is a township-wide approach rather than a watershed-wide approach. But that's just how you get your data, is by the watershed.
Also, the understanding that we have now, based on one watershed, we can apply to the others. And we've actually come up with 2 RFPs that are, hopefully we're going to get something done on. So,
And in this case in particular, we had the most knowledge in that watershed, so it kind of made sense to move that forward. We had the most concerns in that watershed as well as the most data, unless there's something hiding underneath a shelf that we're going to reveal. But that really did have the most, I think, data up to date because of the recent projects.
So what are we directing Dan to do right now?
Well, I don't know how involved we are in this process, like how,
Well,
is
I
this
think we have
Steve
to
working
say
this out
yes.
between CH2M? I mean, how, do we go back through this again with a final? I don't know how exactly this works.
or aren't we going to be doing the same thing as we did before and make a recommendation that these new tasks be taken on, and which new tasks, 1 through 5, 1 through 6, whatever?
And they're
Well,
going to the
last
board?
time we actually had an actual proposal in front of us. This is not really, we haven't really seen the proposal.
This is not a proposal?
This is
No.
a summary
Okay.
of a proposal, but
I would like to see a proposal with tasks.
It would be
and
hard to
costs
recommend
and-
otherwise.
Yeah, before I could make any recommendation, I need to see a complete package, and I wouldn't want it put it before the board, for Dan's sake and our sake, if we truly don't know what the costs and tasks are. I mean, this is a great first start, but to be comfortable with it, these are the same questions that the board's going to ask, that we don't have answers to right now.
So we see a proposal then, and do we want to see task 6 as an
an add-on. Yeah, I think so. And it would maybe not be 6, it would be, maybe it would be concept plans, and you'd have some kind of, I don't even know if we want to go that far. Do we want to just chop that off? And I think it's just complicating things. Would it be easier to just delay that part of the work? Yeah, I think it's really hard to put it, I think it's putting us too far in the future to know what we'd even want that to look like. Not even
I
necessarily.
think it's really important to get through task 5 as quickly as we possibly can.
Yeah, I kind of would like to put 6 on hold and not get bogged down in figuring that out.
Your summary is the result, is taken from a proposal, right?
It is taken from a more fleshed out draft outline that Steve is reviewing. We met last Friday.
What direction did Steve give you to get that?
What you saw tonight is our attempt to take the advice and the direction that Steve provided to us. So it was the township-wide assessment for task one, which again, the model was already set up. And then it was in Steve's words, almost like an allowance for additional modeling. So we really, not necessarily defined as what is going to be modeled, because that has to evolve through the process, but it was really like an allowance. And the same with any kind of field data collection, it'd be an allowance, so many hours, for this size of a crew, that type of thing.
I guess the only thing that I struggle with is not flying too high where we don't have enough data, but flying too low and having so much data and spending a third of a year's fee. That can we come up with a hybrid? I mean, I thought the Ithing Creek watershed was just great. I mean, it was great. It was great analysis. We were comfortable with what we were presenting to the board, what we were approving for the community. And I'm just wondering why we're flying so low right now.
Well, the one
for
thing I would say is that the Ithing Creek fell short in a little bit in that we could have looked at green streets along Conestoga Road per se. And that might have been a good solution for flooding at South Wayne Avenue. But we didn't really go that far in. We didn't allow for that. We kind of just this was very preliminary. I would like to see that type of opportunity remain in this proposal.
Yeah.
Go
ahead, Paul.
That's what I fumbled through before, was the fact that, you used the word intervention. So you could have 10 interventions that solve a problem at the middle school. And the way we did Ithing, we didn't necessarily have that capability to do that, right?
No, we were also kind of fast tracking, so it's a little different. And I think that's where I'm comfortable with eliminating task 6, because those interventions, are going to range in cost, and we'd have to schedule them out. And at that point in time, then we would go forward and put together design. And some of them may not even be. They might be a maintenance thing, and that doesn't even need a design contract.
I'm concerned about the amount of money that's being spent, but at the same time, it's a one-time fee. When you
It is,
break
and
down
it
to
sets us up for success.
Exactly right. My point.
Could I say something
Jim.
at this point? I feel for you. I wish I could jump up there and solve it for you. I think you're better equipped than I am to do it. I would just ask you to keep in mind that you stay the course, be prudent, be practical, and don't get bogged down in a lot of academic analysis and theories and hypotheses. We're human beings. We're not perfect. We're not going to get to the finish line with perfect scores. And if our board has not given you good guidance, I apologize for it. I, for one, am not smart enough to be able to do that, I suppose. But bear in mind, you do have a majority on the Board of Commissioners that backs what you do. What you've done so far is fine. If you've been advocates, I have no problem with that. I don't see it as advocacy. I see it as analysis and technical advice, and I appreciate that for one. But the rest of the board, I think, with one or two exceptions, is going to like what you do. That's it. I wouldn't, as I said, get bogged down in a lot of theory and a lot of. Don's a wonderful guy, and he's an academic. He's got a PhD, as so do you, Paul, I think. And he loves to expostulate on theory and what ifs, and he covered the waterfront tonight, which I don't think advances the program at all. And I, for one, try to be pragmatic and practical, and that's how I'd like you to be as well. So I look forward to whatever you can produce for us, and as soon as you possibly can. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We appreciate that.
Thanks. So Dan, I have I think, idea. So it sounds like, it sounds like people are fairly unanimous in not including item 6. And I think the simple logic is that when you're ready to do item 6, that type of thing would be put before the Board of Commissioners anyway, and to me would be part of a larger package of, here are our results, and therefore we want to go have you draft an RFP. And as part of that draft RFP, and then I think the other one that at least I personally was bothered is the wrong word, that I was personally surprised was, again, I go back to that item 2 where, we've got the guys out in the street, and I know there's more to it than that, but I guess it's that one that I know you need from a pure engineering to have every piece of data or as much data as you think you need to. But I just wonder if that could be somehow scoped as far as like a couple options, dollar-wise, so, because in the end, it's man-hours, right? So if I stop after 100 man-hours and no guys on the street, here's how much it's going to cost. If I take, 1,000 hours and a week of guys on the street, but if you just made a couple assumptions because you don't know, because you don't have the data, then at least we could make the decision, because it seems like 1, 3, 4, and even 5, you should have a fairly good knowledge of how much they would cost. I would think, I mean, you don't need to say that now, but like,
Right.
do you know what I mean? But like
Yeah.
2 seems very hard to, yeah. And then again, the only other thing, I'm not against 5. We have to get a prioritized list. I just don't know that just getting, with Radnor Township, engaging through this forum may be as positive as having you go off and help us develop town meetings, and not that we wouldn't do them anyway.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? It's not the output, it's how we get there and how much we spend of your money or our money to you to do that. That's all.
Well, here's the dilemma. If you're being asked to quantify what my dollar buys in a construction project, how do you do that accurately without that information? Is it possible? We happen to have some survey, we happen to have some plans, not survey, but plans, record plans, that helped assist in that. Without those record plans, really, could you have gone as far as you went?
No.
Not for that type of a project.
Right.
It all depends on the type of project.
Right.
If it's an infrastructure type of project like that, how can you, without knowing what the downstream pipe system looks like, how would you even know what you could discharge? You wouldn't possibly.
Well, so help me understand, how does one develop a cost for that? Otherwise, other than doing what Joe is saying here's, spend a $50K, spend $70K to get a certain, I mean, how do you do that? Because you don't even know what you have to find.
I think he said the magic words when he said an allowance. When he was talking about it, he said it was just a general allowance of what they thought it might be.
Right, and they may need to come back to us and say, hey, this was
right.
way too small. Like, we need to get out and survey, and we need to do this, that, and the other thing. And we would have to appropriate additional funds at that point to make it happen, and we'd have to make that decision. Or, we could have, a situation in the reverse. Well, we didn't actually activate those
We
parts of
didn't need
the
all that.
contract.
In addition, while you're doing this, hopefully Steve's doing some work with finding out what is out there with the camera. And
There's a lot of moving pieces.
Yes.
And so I feel like I agree that that's a very hard number to quantify, and it may, if you have a creative way of putting it in there where it's a starting point maybe, and identify what it would cost if you need to add on,
Right.
like if you needed to survey, or if you just needed field investigation, because it's a very different thing for someone to go out and just look and see, okay, here's where the manholes are, here's where the inlets are, and okay, it looks like it's flowing this way, fine.
Right.
As opposed to getting sizes and inverts and that kind of thing. So it all adds up, and it depends on whether or not we need it. So, and the other point I had to bring up is that you were pointing out there are certain areas that aren't covered by those watersheds. If we're not aware of any concerns in those locations, I'm fine with them not being part of the study. I have no problem with them being left out if we know that there's no problems there. Because to start studying an entirely different watershed for a little piece of the township that has no stormwater management problems wouldn't be a good use of our funds. Do you know if there's any problem areas that have been brought to the township's attention in those locations?
I'm not aware of any problems in those areas.
Something we would
Wait,
have to
wait,
confirm
wait,
before we
wait,
can
wait. Yeah,
decide.
I live in that area, so
So we need to find that
You
out.
live in the area that's not in one of
I
the
live in the,
four.
and I don't want to, I could talk to you offline about.
Yeah, we need to find out if there are some
It's
concerns
not-
there.
That's why I asked the question at the beginning, which is Radnor extends beyond Wayne, and all I'm asking is that we go to the townships, we go to the fire departments, and just not the Radnor department. I'm covered by Bryn Mawr. People are covered by Broomall. People are covered by Newtown Square. So just because it's in the very corner and it's not in Wayne doesn't mean it's.
No, my concern is to start modeling an entirely different watershed would really increase the cost.
No, I don't think taking a few blocks in an area, a watershed is
So we
in some
wouldn't
sense an
do it the
artificial
same
boundary.
way. We would do, well, I mean, not necessarily. I mean, they're linked. So
Why wouldn't this just be, let's find out the problems?
they would
Right.
be,
I don't
in my-
disagree, I'm just saying, don't ignore them.
But
Because
in my opinion,
haven't
you would
done
take a different
township-
approach.
That's fine, but you haven't done a township-wide assessment if you say, I'm going to do 4 watersheds, but the 4 watersheds don't cover the township.
Well, modeling 4 watersheds, but also doing what you were saying is, I think that should be the first step. The first step should be not just taking from the township administration, but the police and the fire department, as well as PennDOT, any reports of safety, flooding, hazards, and even, I mean, if you can come up with other places where we can find out about flood damages, I don't know if that's something that's publicly available. I think that's probably something might be harder to get. But you have to reach out to the folks in that area to please raise their hand if they have an issue. Something too that we could, I mean, continue to do I feel like we're misusing that email address by using it as a copy for our emails. It should really be out there for people to say, hey, by the way, there's a problem here. Can you please add that to your list?
I have gotten some.
We don't get any of that, so that would be great to know, like, how effective.
A couple.
How effective that email address has been, and how can we make it more effective? And you might have recommendations on that. How to get people who have a problem to know where to go and how to disseminate that information to the right place. Because I don't know that all the message is coming through. Do you feel like it is? I feel like some of it is, but there's probably more information out there that would be easily obtained if people understood where they can send their concerns.
Just in the interest of time, and since we have to get to the budget, do you have anything more to add regarding the scope? Or?
I think just to address Joe, I mean, we could also look into like how much extra cost it would take to capture those other little pieces that don't fall within one of the 4 watersheds. If that's a minor addition, then we can certainly include it.
A high-level model, it shouldn't be much of anything, I wouldn't think.
Right.
So we're getting a specific proposal like you would want to see from you? Is that what we're aiming for?
Yeah, but this is a cost proposal. You're not advertising yourselves. We're done with that.
Right,
We
right.
already know your capabilities. It's just a matter of what the scope it's a scope and price type of thing.
Yeah, I just
Yeah.
want to make sure that we get what we need, so. And when would that happen, guys?
Within a week. We're again, I know Steve is reviewing it. I don't want to speak for him, but he wanted to make sure that it had the appropriate amount of time. That he had the appropriate amount of time, and it was done right. Because it's obviously critical to moving forward.
Then to move forward, I'd like to just make a recommendation or whatever. You're better at this stuff, but I think we should agree on forming a subcommittee so that we don't hold this up. And that subcommittee would work with Steve to review and finalize the proposal so it doesn't have to wait another month to get to the Board of Commissioners.
Except that we'd have to vote on it. We'd have to vote on it.
I'd be willing to let smart people.
I don't know. Do we feel like we have to vote on it at our next meeting? I kind of feel like you could send it to us in advance and there could be comments.
Right, I think we could work with Dan before our next meeting, but I think it's something that if we go before the board, we should take a vote, and I'm not trying to hold it up. I want to go forward, but we should see it, we should vote on it, and I don't want to waste the next 3 weeks. I think we should definitely form a subcommittee, work with Dan and Steve so that we can work out whatever issues or questions people have in the next 2-3 weeks, but that at our February meeting, we should be ready then to vote on it, and then go to the second meeting, board meeting in February.
I should have been clear. I'm comfortable enough in what Dan described, and I feel that we've given him enough feedback that I'd be comfortable with a subcommittee taking it to closure. I don't know that I need, because, for me, I'm just saying for me,
I just don't know policy-wise if that works.
Right.
I really
I'm
don't know that we can
comfortable
do-
with the subcommittee, but
If a
policy-wise, we
subcommittee
have to
does
vote on
work,
it.
that's
Yeah,
not
unfortunately,
something we
Steve's not
can
here to
take an
comment on that.
action on. I have no problem with the concept, I just think that that's not really an available option for us, unfortunately. I think we have to act as a board.
And we need to get through the budget here so that we can actually go and spend dollars, because that will be a month delay anyway after we get that ordinance passed.
Is this what I'm doing? Where'd my files go? Well, it's circling here. Let's see. Ah, there we go.
It did, yeah.
Which user did you use? Did you use the one in the middle?
What's that?
Which user did you log in with?
The middle one, yeah.
Okay.
All right, so I'm presenting a proposal for how we handle the stormwater budget going 5 years out. And this is something that Joe and I worked up over the holidays. So we're basically recommending a big picture, high-level look over 5 years based on the idea of percentage yearly goals in 4 particular areas. And these 4 areas are: 1, capital improvement, which is new projects and programs, and then we write the word evolve to 67% per year. So you'll see in the budget itself that first couple of years we're not there, but we'd like to eventually get to that point of spending about that much per year of the dollar amount that's coming in. We want to spend roughly 20% per year for repair, maintenance, and maintain infrastructure, so that's repair, cleaning, and MS4 stuff. We've previously agreed to approximately 5% per year for rebates, incentives, and grants, and then general engineering and administration, roughly 8 to 10% per year. So it's not just administration, that's really engineering work that CH2M is doing for us. CH2M, okay. So just some comments. The percentage is based upon the fee received each year. So it's been around $1 million a year, so that's what we just adjust that as we go along. Notice that the repair and capital sum to around 85% of the total budget. A note, right now, nearly all of the stormwater dollars have been spent on repair, and so obviously that's going to shift as we begin some of these capital projects. Also note that this and this are pretty much fixed in terms of what they are going to be, so pretty well defined, and we expect the cost to be consistent year to year. I guess the one place where it might be in question is if we don't have that many people applying, then we might not spend 5%, but just note that. And then the idea is that once we get through some of these assessments like Dan was just talking about, we can do this cost-benefit analysis of both capital projects and capital versus repair, however the board decides we should go. once we define these goals, then budgeting year to year is just going to be easier and simpler. So the idea is to recommend to the board that we include projects, either repair or capital, only after they're approved by the board. And that Dan and Steve would update the monthly budgets with specifics, and we'll show you what that looks like in the spreadsheet. And then every time we do that, we would give a budget update to the board for them to see how that project fits within the overall scope of the stormwater budget. So I will go on and talk to the spreadsheet, but if anybody has questions or comments.
Well, I was just going to give some color commentary that last budget, that last item with the sub-item there with the budget update, that really speaks directly to, I think, what Mr. Curley was asking for, right? Because we need to provide them context when we propose a new program. So if you think back to, if you think back to just the Banbury, we would have given them a budget that said, here it is now, and then now you can see how that, and you gave them a couple-year outflow, and you could say, okay, here's what the impact is, so that they can have a better understanding. And exactly.
Any other thoughts?
The only
questions?
comment I would like to make is that I love it. The 20% for the repair, cleaning, and MS4, I mean, we're taking that as our duty to include. That's not, if that can come from the township
fund.
budget, we'd be perfectly happy to change that to an 87 up top.
Right, yeah, I think that.
All of us, I think, would be
Yes,
thrilled to do
right.
that.
Yeah, so it would be board directed, and we can present it that way to them, is to say, this is the number we believe.
Yeah, and we'd be fine if that 20% could come out of the general funds instead.
I was actually working some language, so as Paul's showing you the budget, maybe we can come up with some language that can talk to exactly that. Because the lens we went through did not include thinking about that. Right, that's right.
And is it something in general that we want to send to the board, since, if they're thinking of changing or tweaking what our duties are, is that through this budget, we see the need really for capital improvement projects, and that if there's funding elsewhere for it, we'd like you to approve to use that funding wherever it comes from for these type of projects, but for what we're putting forth in our budget, we would like to add that extra 20% for capital projects.
Well, I
That's
agree
the-
with that 100%, but are we raising something that we're not aware of? We heard the other commissioner, I'm sorry, I don't know his last name.
Mr. Higgins? Jim Higgins?
Yeah, Jim Higgins was saying that most of the board is in favor of what we're doing. So I think it's very good that we propose that these maintenance issues go to the general budget, but don't know how far you want to push this, because you may lose some allies.
No, I think it's just food for thought, and if that's something that they are comfortable with, then that would just benefit it would accelerate the ability to address some of the flood concerns, is what it would do.
Agreed.
Yeah. Anything else with this?
Good job so far.
Good, good. Okay, let's see, let's get out of there. Now let's look at some specific numbers then. Where is, it didn't open, okay. So this is the specific numbers going 2015 through 2020. If we go through this, so we have our four big areas, and it's got a little complicated, but where we could, we reflected the percentages of our goals. That's on the years going out a bit. But in the interim, in 2016 and 2017, we had to make some adjustments for stuff that was planned or already been approved by the board. And we also have excess funds compared to what we normally expect to be an income stream in a year. So the way this runs, we're expecting to be at this percent where we're only spending 35% of our budget as in the year that just passed. In 2016, we're targeting roughly 159% of the budget, where we'd spend 110% on capital improvements. That's based on ITHN and hopefully the township-wide assessment, which may be more now, and then repair and maintenance, just defer, I mean, what we've already allocated for is $360,000 in 2016. Going out to 2017, we have yet another Malin Road will cost us an additional $300,000, so I think we added $100,000 more for other repairs for 36%, 109% for 158. And that spends us down to roughly where we should be, and then we start spending at the normal levels. Maybe there's a higher one here. I can't remember what this was. Yes, this is our township-wide assessment. So we're just trying to spread the money out. All this is fluid, but this gives you a rough idea of what the budget would look like. And again, the only time we list something specific, and we'll have Banbury under capital improvement, is when the board has said yes to the money. Okay, that way we don't.
Are we 100% sure those are both approved budgets? Malin and Mill Road?
We need to confirm that. And,
Okay.
and you know, Dan, for your action, we'd appreciate.
It would be good to
We
know
should-
what
shouldn't-
meeting they were approved at
Right, we
also.
shouldn't have to-
Like
Yeah,
we
what
put that
ordinance
in there.
approved it, or is it by ordinance?
Because what we got from Steve today said Mallbridge was approved and is ready for construction, and that's not on here. Mill, since it's near and dear to my heart, I'm almost positive was approved. And I thought Malin was approved at the same time Mill was approved. But the point is, whatever is approved,
Goes up there.
and the only other thing that I remember that we missed is that would go under capital is the Radnor Middle School connection.
Yes. Okay, yeah.
The design has been approved.
But that design, right, so
The
that,
design fee only.
that's right, the design
Right, but
fee.
it was approved, so we want to put it.
Well, did we
as a-
actually get as far as, did we get a cost and they approved a cost, or did they just approve the request for a price?
No,
Yeah, they got a proposal, and
And the
as far
money's
as I know,
done.
it was approved.
Okay, so we can put that in then.
That's right, but you get the idea. It's, for without getting into the particulars, the idea is it's a one-stop snapshot of what has been approved and how much major, multi-100K kind of programs, and then.
And I just pulled some information that, just because it was important, we were talking about the culvert design. So I had here from what Steve had told me, that Mill Road culvert design, that Gannett Fleming was awarded this design and permitting this past fall, and that bids were to occur in January. That Mulbridge Road culvert was awarded this summer, that there's some utility relocation work, and it's anticipated that it will start this winter.
Maybe it was Malin that wasn't. I thought that was two of the three. Maybe that Malin should really say Mallbridge.
Okay, well, we'll check that out.
Okay, yeah, and
And
maybe
again,
I'll,
I mean, Dan, can I, turn this over to you, and you can just,
yeah,
filling it
that
out.
would be really great.
yeah. Thank you. And so the idea, again, would, a spreadsheet like this would go to the board each time we bring a project to them, and we'd have the impact of the project in there.
And, the colors are a little hard to see, but, you notice that the long-term goal, which by this budget, we wouldn't hit till 2019, which is, we're getting 67% for capital and, a smaller percent for, 20% for repairs. And you notice that the numbers that are not colored green, so now look at repair going back, we're spending a real large amount of our front-end capital on repair in the next couple years.
Which brings up the next point, which is the idea of having a prioritized list of capital, of repair projects from you guys. I still am confused about this. I thought there was approval for Gannett Fleming to do a township-wide assessment of repair projects that were needed, but that is not the case.
Not just all repair, it was culvert repairs, culvert.
Okay, but
So-
is that started?
I would love to see the status of that. That would
Yeah.
be very helpful.
Yes, okay.
Well as
As
the videotaping.
Right, the
I mean,
televised.
at this point, I don't even know how, at this point, it should have tripled in size because we wanted to do that every year.
Yeah.
you know? So I don't know if that's something that, Dan, did you review that at all, or is that coming before you? No, because I think really we could look at that and see if there's an opportunity to
Get data for,
get more, well, really go along with what we originally planned, which was a certain amount per year on that,
Right.
and maybe,
we did approve, what, 50K or something, wasn't it 50K?
but what I'm saying is I have no idea what the number is right now. I have no idea what the scope is right now, and I have
Right.
no idea on whether that still, because we haven't acted on it, if it could be expanded
Yeah,
to incorporate what we intended.
right, yeah.
That's something I'd love to know, because to me, that was like a pretty important aspect of,
So can we, Dan, if we could have those as action items, like, within a week? I feel like I've asked for them several times now and I haven't gotten anything, so that would be great. That's all I have, unless there are more questions.
I guess the thing you're going to have to do is, when you present this, I'm assuming you're the one presenting
I
it?
guess.
Because I like the way you're presenting it.
Okay.
You're going to have to get into a little more detail,
Of the
because we're
numbers.
so familiar with it. But
Yes,
like explaining, even I had the question, where did the extra 100,000? That's the SEPTA money.
Right,
And then
yeah.
things like, well, how do you have over 100%? Well, that's because the funding
haven't
was
had that.
held. Yeah. So, but I think you did a fabulous job, and I love it.
Good.
So I'd like to take a vote on percentages. So what we proposed here was 67% and 20% of the major two areas, and then 8 and 5 for the rest. Is that something that the rest of you guys feel is appropriate?
I think it's a very good place to start. If we can convince the board to reduce that 20, not necessarily even take it off, just reduce it, it helps us out. It's just a great place to start.
And I guess then the second thing would be an action for Dan to then take this and make sure it's reflective of dollars spent to date, as well as reflective of all approved programs with the money spent to date, as well as current estimate to completion. And, you know, if it's like, you know, if it's like the connector at Radnor Middle School, it would seem to me that it would consist of both the engineering, and then maybe you'd have a separate number that would be what you estimate it to be the construction cost. Because if you're going to go spend for the engineering, I don't think you're going to stop at that point.
Well, the only thing I could say is, rather than like holding us back for that information that's missing, you could just take them out right now and show them both, show them without that Malin Road, Mill Road, and then just pop them in there to say, this is the type of thing we'll be doing in the future. As information
see.
comes in, we'll be breaking it out. And our recommendation would be based on those percentages. And that's what we'll be asking them to approve. We're not asking them to approve funding for Malin Road and Mill Road. We're asking
so
them
you're
to
saying
approve our
reflect-
budget in percentages.
Just leave
Because
it
if
all
it's
as-
done, it's done. If it's not done, it's not done. And those are for another day. Do you know what I mean? Just for the purpose of moving
guidelines.
forward.
They're guidelines.
So I think you can take Malin Road and Mill Road off this time round if there's any question about whether or not they were approved, because either they are or they aren't, and they're going to come out of our budget if they're already approved. Same as the engineering design and et cetera. It's going to come out of there, and they are in part of that category, and that's all fine. And moving forward, we're going to have that information in hand before we update the budget.
Then what would be the line item for, say, repair maintenance? Would it be 360 and 400, or is it back to 200?
Put the money back into the general, so put it back in the category it belongs in, is what I'm saying, in the general term.
I like your idea, but I think we need to reflect 360 and 400 or whatever the numbers are. So maybe if you could just have a second sheet that said, in 2015, here's what we spent. in 2016 and 17, here's what we already know is obligated.
The numbers came from your spreadsheet that was presented. So I think, it's reflective of what you had, so that's all I had to work with, so.
So I think it's probably accurate, but
The only thing I'm saying is I'm not making a recommendation that they fund Malin Road tonight.
No.
Got
I'm
it.
making a recommendation on percentages of the budget.
Yeah.
So whether Malin Road has been approved or not approved, Mill Road has been approved or not approved, has nothing to do with what we're doing. So I don't
Okay.
want it to complicate.
It shouldn't be on this sheet.
I'd rather that just stay with the percentages.
They keep the broad categories, then.
Right, but the
So the only thing I'm unclear is in 16 and 17, does repair say 360 and 400 or 200,000 for both of them?
it has to be what we really know to be the current state of affairs.
Well, if they've been approved and they go to bid and we actually get a real cost, then those costs are just going to be taken out of that year.
Yeah, but they'll exceed the 200,000.
That's his point. You can't, it's not an accurate reflection of what they've already approved. That's the only thing. I think getting rid of
I'm
them-
not quite following
So
you.
look at like just this one right here, okay? 200,000 is where it should be, but on Malin Road, if this is really truly Malin, on Malin Road, we're going to spend $300,000 in 2017, so we're above 20%,
So we can't. put
based upon
20%
what was
in.
already allocated. So we kind of have to deal with the bump in the road that we have,
Of what's
because we
already
didn't
approved.
have this process for controlling the budget until it's out of the system.
I guess part of, one way to address it would be just to put that money back in and the percentages fall where they fall.
Right.
That's
That's
what I-
Okay,
what we've done,
okay.
actually.
And then
We-
you have to explain why.
Right.
That's right.
Right. Yeah,
That's right.
okay.
Is that going to work?
No, yeah, I think.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's the best way to handle it because it is what it is. If it's
Right.
been approved, it's been approved.
Right.
And moving forward, we'll have like,
Much cleaner
right.
process.
But, so I guess the point is, there's nothing that I see from what we've discussed that would preclude us from Paul, if he's available, being ready to brief this at the 22nd meeting. Because you should have ample opportunity to get whatever data in, enough detail for the, as spent, and then it's just our goal, right? So it sounds like it's really just removing the two lines, or if you want to keep the two lines, I don't know that it all matters that much, because the idea, in the end, it's showing that the goal of the percentages, which is shown on your first sheet.
Right.
So,
As long as we can get it in time, then that's
Yeah.
fine too. Yeah.
and so how about these kind of words? The attached budget is, and since you're briefing it anyway, maybe you don't even need this, but the attached budget is recommended for the Board of Commissioner approval. We recommend the stormwater budget be listed as 4 major subcategories with the following percentages, and then we would just list them as you do in the first page already. And then the new part is the current SWIMAC charter requires stormwater fee to be spent on both maintenance and capital improvements. To date, nearly all dollars have been spent on repair, and that will continue, or a larger percentage than we would like to see, or it will be spent in 2016 and 2017. Consideration should be given to finding funds to support above 20% from existing, the existing tax base or something like that. Is that?
Yeah. I guess the only thing is like, I don't know if you have to say the 20%. Just say, that alternate funding for these maintenance and repair issues, we recommend finding alternate funding because it's taking such a large percentage away from the focus.
Yeah, yeah.
Right, per the approved resolution, some funding had to be put. We chose 20%, although we feel it's a large chunk. We have to make recommendations based on the approved resolution.
Yes, right. It reads that way.
So maybe really all it is, Paul, is taking that one chart you have, since you're going to be presenting anyway, is just taking that one chart you have and maybe turning it into 2 pages to just, because, we're already tight for space, to just, and then this.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Okay, Charles?
I just want to say you guys did a great job, and over the holidays, you guys cranked through a lot of work, so thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Since you're going Monday, Paul, in case they talk about the single-family residence rebate, the
Oh,
retroactive,
yeah.
can we kill two birds with one stone?
I guess so. I have to look at my, well.
No
I'll
pressure.
move some things around probably, but okay.
Okay.
All right.
All right, I'd like to make a motion that we recommend those percentages as detailed by the presentation to the Board of Commissioners.
A second.
Aye.
Aye.
Yes, that would not have been good. Wait. I have just one thing that I just wanted to get information. We talked about a little bit, Paul talked about it, just getting some update, just in general, since Dan's here, on storm sewer inspection TV we talked about. There's and the culvert we talked about, that Gannett Fleming's going to do. But the other are just some miscellaneous things like the stormwater ordinance revisions, the septic train station. There were just a few projects that we've talked about on and off that I'd just like to see what happened to them. When you're passing with Steve, because you have nothing else to do.
Could we, I appreciate.
I mean, I would just like an update on a lot of things we've gone back and forth the last, now this will be our third year.
I think we should be a little more explicit. We would ask for that at the next SWIMAC meeting, that all those topics be covered, and we'd also ask that beginning next month, we begin to see a budget is the wrong word, an accounting of dollars spent through 15 and then 16 year to date, and that with approved projects, what, we kind of showed you here, so then month to month, we can understand and be able to articulate what the budget is and what we spent, what we have left, so that when we have decisions to make on spending, we can do it.
Understood.
The other thing I'd like to mention is that many boards such as ours have work sessions, and I think we're kind of in need of them. I don't know how available anyone here is to meet more often, but I think in some instances, we really do need to digest information, have it in advance of our meeting, discuss it, and then be able to take actions. This one, we took several meetings to go through the budget process, and initially, I think we felt very pressured to make decisions before we were comfortable with them, and I'm glad that we didn't take that route. And I think oftentimes I feel like I'm unprepared to make decisions because I'm getting information right before a recommendation is being asked for. So I would like to be able to have occasionally maybe a work session where we go over existing information, things like that, just in an open forum, but not as a formal meeting, so that we can just kind of dialogue about things. And I just don't know how you guys feel about that, but I just feel like we don't have enough time in our meeting. And the types of sessions I'm talking about, we could schedule them and then hold them as needed, and then eventually kind of gradually grow out of them as we move forward. Because right now we're digesting a lot of information, and in the long term, it won't be as intensive, but I don't feel like we have enough time. I think we could be getting more done if we had more time as a group, because you can't do anything unless we're together.
So I am in favor of that. I asked the question, how much of that is because we're getting the information at the last minute rather than the fact that we don't have time to digest it?
I think it's a little bit of both, because sometimes once I have the information, I want to discuss it back and forth and get more information, because it's not, maybe I need more information. So even if we get it ahead of time and we don't discuss it, you may bring something to my attention that I need to follow up on before I can make a decision. And waiting that whole next month or then even another month, it seems like we could be a little more expeditious with our decision making. And I think we've done well considering the time we've been given to review material. But, and I also think that would give maybe the Board of Commissioners more opportunities to do like we had tonight. You really don't have time for that at our meetings to hear. And I think it's important for us to hear and be given direction from the Board of Commissioners as well. And maybe even to bring in some technical expertise, to maybe do like a, kind of like a Stormwater 101 and have that be something that's available, that's recorded and available for the township residents as well as any other Board of Commissioners, things like that. I just feel like our meetings monthly isn't enough time. So maybe that's something we need to look into. And maybe we have to do like a straw poll to see when people, because obviously we wouldn't want to have it on another Thursday night because already, and it doesn't necessarily have to be in this room. I think the police roll call room was fine for that type of work.
Speaking of that, there was an email, I don't know if everyone was copied or if Steve just sent it to me, and if not, I'll get it to everyone, that I think it's March and April. They're doing the citizens police training in here, so either we meet in the roll call room those months for April, March and April, or just pick different dates. I just wanted to throw it out there with the new chair and vice chair.
I think we should go back to our origins and just head
The
back
Willows?
to the roll call room.
I think the roll call room is great. Oh, and lastly, I don't know if you saw Jim's email, but if we want to do an article, I think it's due the end of the month to get an article in to Jim, so we can think about what we want to get in
I
there.
think it'd be a good
nominate
idea
Joe.
to re-emphasize the grants available. I think that would be at least, maybe we don't need to do a whole lot there, but we should at least, say, if you're thinking about your landscaping for the spring, keep in mind you have these opportunities with the rain garden to get reimbursement through the township. I think that's, for me, that would be a good thing.
I'll send you those 2 emails. I'm passing the baton. It's all you.
And I can
No,
help you.
I just want to make sure I understand for the budget. That needs to be forwarded to the Board of Commissioners through Steve in advance.
Yeah, typically they have to get at least a week, and to the Friday before even a week, to get Steve information so that he can include in the packet for the board. So if the meeting is on the 25th, that would be tomorrow, wouldn't it?
Ready? You got it, Joe?
I mean, if I said, if we can ask Steve if we can have to Monday. Sometimes he's been willing, depending on what the agenda's like. What I would recommend is saying that, please put us on.
Monday's a holiday.
Ugh. What I would say is contact Steve and say, Steve, with the holiday coming up, we want to be on the agenda for the board meeting. Can we get you the paperwork on the 19th, and would that be acceptable?
And if not, we need numbers from Dan, and then we can go from there. And there's nothing else we have to do. Take some wording from Joe.
And I have your latest spreadsheet. That was what you emailed earlier today, so yeah, I can take it from here. Sure.
Just in case we have to send it tomorrow.
Well, I can work directly with Steve.
I just want to look at it again.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's fine.
We'll take
They
the
will-
PowerPoint.
And work that just into a short memo recommendation. Okay. All right, any further items? No public comment?
Congratulations, guys.
Also, thank you, Heather. Thank you for what you've done for the past 2 years. You've really done a ton of work for us.
A good support team.
And now to set the next meeting, I believe February the 11th would be the second Thursday?
Yes.
Is that
That's good.
good for everyone?
The 11th.
The 11th, February 11th? Okay, with that, if there are no further items, meeting is adjourned.